Tonight, I'm going to tell you about how we lost our telepathy. And first, we have to go back to the last time we were going through Ascension, which was 25,000 years ago. And I remember I was born in an area that would be close to where Greece is now. It was extremely beautiful, very advanced civilization. It had survived for some unknown reason, all of the flooding, and it was the flood. We tipped and flood water came over. My father, it was a kingdom. My father was an advisor to the king, and they were quite old. My father lost his first family in the mountains, thinking they'd be safe in a cave high up, but instead it was an avalanche. So he had a second family, and I was his oldest son. My name was Alexinaides, and I was called Didi. And I was sent off when I was about, God knows, 17 or so, to go look and see who else was still alive on the planet, because basically I think they wanted me out of their hair and I was obstreperous. Anyway, so I went off and I went to the north, and it was still not so far north as to where the glacier was, but it was getting close to where the ice was up north. And there was a whole camp of very smelly, tall creatures that remind me of the Yeti. And then, so I got away from there, and then I went east, and I met people that were clearly ancestors of some of the Russians athletes, like the type that's more stocky, tends to have dark hair rather than the ballerina types. They were, the kind of people that could stand on horses and shoot arrows and all that kind of stuff, and ride on a horse upside down, that sort of thing. And anyway, so there were these different groups of people all over. But what we had in similarity was that we were all coming together and helping one another and moving into Ascension. And as a result of that, we really got into telepathy, and we really got into all of us joining together. There was, my older sister ended up marrying this man who lived in what would now be Cairo on the Nile. But back then, the Sahara Desert was completely lush forest. And he had those wide eyes that went around the side. We looked like we look, but my sister married this man who was Egyptian, who had those eyes that came around. So in my mind, in retrospect, I assume he was some kind of ET. We advanced and advanced and advanced, and we kind of unfortunately advanced to the point where we were more spiritual than technological. And a lot of people believed that we were so advanced in higher density that we could take out any enemy psychically. Not to worry, we could create force fields and have defenses up, which, yes, there are those in the higher densities that can do that, which is why I do actually agree with Morgan Rose when she says what Val Neck said was that we have what he calls a cedar race. I call them an original race, or one of the elders, helping fight the reptilians right now, because they are able to put up a force field that blocks these guys. Well, we assumed we could do the same thing, but we did have some pragmatic, practical, advanced, higher density people. In India, we had an Air Force. In Egypt, we had an Air Force. And in South America, we had an Air Force. And we were one world, like Star Trek, where everybody got together and everybody knew everybody. But we all still had a great individuality of culture. It was utopia. It was wonderful. And the problem was that we were fighting the reptilians, and also it wasn't like Atlantis, which happened later. This was earlier. And we were getting hit from an advanced ET race and some humans that somehow or other had put this together with them, and reptilians, Draco, that had gone over or still remained on the other side from the Draco Wars earlier out in the galaxy. So here we were. The problem was that our Air Force was all telepathic. Our Air Force were brilliant because they were all telepathic. So when they went out in formation, they would just instinctively, almost like a hive mind, know this one's going to take the right flank and this one's going to take the left flank. And one of us is going to take on point of the three planes in the center. And it wouldn't necessarily be the one in the center, because it had to do with psychic energy and who your opponent was, which one of the three would be better at going out. And so what happened was that the opponents had much stronger telepathy up close. And it was like a magnet, and they could literally destroy anyone who was telepathic coming in with their vicinity, far more than they could destroy someone who was not telepathic. And you can see where this is leading. So first thing we did was we put helmets on and I was part of the military. So I was actually in a room where I saw this kind of stuff happen. And we gave them helmets to block out the telepathy of the enemy. The problem was that it blocked out the telepathy between each other. We had not realized that would be a problem. It never occurred to anyone that these guys couldn't still fly without telepathy, but they couldn't. And what happened invariably was that the ones on the end who were kind of used to their patterns could continue their patterns, but the three in the center never knew who was going to go head on and be the spear through the center. And they, over and over again, all three would jump, because you would jump telepathically from here to there, and like a whoosh. That was part of our skill as Air Force, that we could use our planes and use it to transport ourselves through space and time. And so the three would jump all at the same time and destroy each other. Invariably, it was like, how do you stop them from doing it? But each would get that, each one was a leader. Each one had that instinct to go and be the one that takes it out, but they'd all have it at the same time. And I have to wonder if there wasn't some other energy coming in to override their telepathy, even with the helmets on, some farther advanced. I don't know, but it could have been, because it was just too much, too many, like over and over again. But again, it could be 100 monkey thing. I don't know. But all I do know is that we watched them do it over and over again in that room. And we just were like, it's all over. It's all over. And then we had to deal with the fact that so many people were telepathic, and how are we going to save them from the torture of these guys, bringing them into their vicinity and then torturing them, either physically or sexually torturing them with their minds overwhelming, because telepathy was like an open door for them to just go right in. I'm actually re-recording this next section because when I looked at it in the playback, I realized that I think I spent many minutes with my eyes closed. And I realized I should explain to you that when I remote view or remember things privately, my eyes are closed. And I have to remember when I'm telling you these things that you're out there and I need to talk to you, not just be remembering it so deeply that I forget where I am. So another thing was that while these Air Force pilots were doing what they were doing, we were trying to also use telepathy. But of course, because they had the helmets on, we couldn't get through to help them. It was a mind-boggling situation. And what happened as a result was that there was a meeting. Now, I have seen this meeting over and over again, practically once monthly for years. And I never knew why, but in the meeting, I was in a more of a back row, like someone young, like someone young. And one of the men there was the man who would be Jesus Christ. And he was talking quite a bit. And then the other man who was the head of the meeting was the man who would be Jesus's brother, James. And he was in charge of the meeting. And in the meeting, he was saying we had to all give up our telepathy. It was the only way. And there was an argument between him and Jesus. And I call him on that because that's how we know them. Jesus said, we can't give up the angelic host. And there was a squabble about that. And then the decision was that the angelic host would remain, but we would not be able to really know about them unless we already had a sense they were there. And this was the hard part was that they always used to be able to just be at one with us because we were telepathic with them. And so we could do stuff together in a sense. One could do things with one's angels. That's pretty cool. But now we didn't have them there. But they could still be there if you asked, but you needed to know that you had to ask. That was the compromise. Trickery, but still. And that's why when Jesus actually had his life, he rebelled. And he knew that so many of the things that he taught were going to be lost. And the most important thing that he had to teach was to remind us that there's life after death, that there's reincarnation. And even if we couldn't hang on to reincarnation, at least we would know there was life after death. That was the most important thing, because meanwhile, the West was heading towards a world that we would, in a sense, equate to like communism, where they don't allow any religions whatsoever. And therefore, we get to the point where we all start to believe we die dead and then have no responsibility while we're alive, because there's no judgment, no repercussions, no anything, no karma. And that was the goal. And that was foreseen. And Jesus, his main thing was to make sure we knew that there's life after death. And all the other things that he taught, such as, well, he taught Magdalene that when you cross over, how you avoid the pitfalls of the bad things that can happen to you when you cross over, which are true. I've witnessed them myself. And also he taught reincarnation, obviously, and he taught the angelic host, and that you needed to ask them, and that they're still there. And then he taught many other things, all of which were sacrificed for the one thing that they couldn't get rid of because of all the others being sacrificed. That was life after death. Anyway, so here's this meeting, and we now are told we can't use telepathy anymore. Anyway, we gave up our telepathy. And as a result of that, we had an elven race here. We had an elven race, and they couldn't come down to a lower density. They could not give up their telepathy. And that we saw with Tolkien. That was real. We just can't believe it, because you'll see my video with Samantha. We talk about limits and how we don't believe things. But yeah, that's one of the things we can't believe. So another thing that happened was later on, I had a life I was an old fisherman at this point. I'd been a fisherman my whole life. And I had a grandson, and he was in my fishing boat with me, and we were out in the middle of the night. And this was, I'd say, about 300 years after we gave up our telepathy. And the problem was that there were still people that would show up with telepathy. And we had to be incredibly careful, because if a mothership came over, and they would periodically come back and scour the planet looking for humans that were telepathic. And my grandson had no shield, and we hadn't had anybody come and visit for decades. But when I was a child and they came to find us, we still had the helmets left over from the war from 300 years before. The helmets that would keep us from hearing their telepathy kept them from hearing our telepathy. And so we would have put the helmets on. But for some reason, something happened and they no longer functioned. And so by the time or they were lost, or maybe only I think only the rich had them. Why, of course. Anyway, my grandson was in great danger, and I used my telepathy to reach out and create a shield over his head, in which I manifested the same energy pattern as the helmet that had been on my head as a child. And it worked. And so then, of course, there was those of us who were underground telepaths, and we knew not to show each other anything while that mothership was still overhead. But as soon as it was gone, I shared this information of what had happened with my grandson, which, by the way, I had to keep until they were gone. I had to keep something over his head. And what happened was that, of course, spread through. And so eventually, come the time of Atlantis, we still had secret groups throughout that had all sorts of abilities, because we had the ability to shield it from people, until the Atlantean War, when a lot of those groups went way underground, because there was a whistleblower and somebody ratted where we all were. So then we had to go to the even more secret places that only a handful of people knew about. Anyway, those secret groups never left. They still exist today. Oh yeah, they're out there, and they're working to help everyone too. And so are the ETs helping everyone. It's going to be okay. We're all going to get our telepathy back again. But we knew that we had to wait until now, because we knew that we were on the circle going down, and we were going to go into that period, which, you know, in India and Hindustan, they call Kali, and that's the negative. And we're just coming out of it. And so now is the first time. And of course, synchronistically, we now have the advanced technology to block out their telepathy and still have ours mutual. We actually got there. It's kind of like how they ended up handling the Borg. But anyway, okay, so that's it. That's it for now. I have to talk about the fact that we've descended into 2D, and we've become so linear, we're not even almost 3D anymore. That's something we need to make sure we come back into 3D. Okay. Good night.